happy to bring in Bishop Gregory Mansour and Christopher Hart Moynihan to talk about the beautiful country of Lebanon on Monday, July 31st. Wonderful to see both of you. And Bishop Mansour, we have some friends of Lebanon watching us, and we wanted to begin with a prayer.
I'm so glad to be on today, especially with what you're doing and your proposal to take a group to Lebanon. So I'm happy to speak about Lebanon and also to pray about Lebanon. So in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, may everything we do be according to your will, according to your great love for us and your great providence. Bless Lebanon and all those who advocate for her. Let her continue to be more than a country, a message. And may the traveling of those who are going to Lebanon show them the beauty and the joy and the great gift it is to live in a Christian-Muslim conviviality, a place where Christians are free to express their faith and to love their country. We ask you, Heavenly Father, to bless our time and our conversation through the intercession of Saint Charbel, Our Lady of Lebanon, and all the saints. Bismil Ab wal Ibn wa Ruh Qudus ilahan wahid. Amen.
Well, that was a beautiful prayer, and we do hope that those things can all come to pass, that we can make a beautiful visit to Lebanon. And Christopher, we've traveled to Lebanon before. What kind of a country is it? And can you ask the bishop to help us prepare for this trip?
Lebanon, yeah, we were there last year, September 17th to 25th, 2022. And I was blown away. I thought my expectations were completely different from the reality of Lebanon. It was just an incredible place, full of beautiful landscapes, wonderful people, welcoming, ancient traditions, and just the way that the people live together, Christian and Muslim, Druze, everybody living in one land, with conflicts in the past, of course, but still recognizing that they're neighbors and they can live alongside one another, was just something that I didn't really expect, especially in the Middle East, which is a place that we've heard so much about as being a place of conflict and war and sectarianism. So to me, it was basically an eye-opener, something that was completely different from what I had been conditioned to expect. And I could keep going. I could talk about Beirut. I could talk about the Kadisha Valley in northern Lebanon and how stunning it was, and the spirituality of the people. Northern Lebanon, where we spent a lot of our time, Anaya, going to the tomb of Saint Charbel in Anaya. And all of those would take a long time to describe, but I'll just say that they were all equally impactful and amazing to experience. And yes, so I'd like to ask the bishop, Bishop Mansour. We've talked, I think we've certainly talked a couple times, and I've also gotten your thoughts about Lebanon in the past and the situation, and how do you see the situation now, and what do you think are some of the why do you think it's important to visit Lebanon and to bring people to Lebanon at this juncture in its history?
Last month, there was 1.4 million visitors to Lebanon, and the month before that, about the same. That really strengthens the local people. So I remember Patriarch Fire before Patriarch Rai. People would come to Lebanon, and they would ask, how can we help? And he would always tell them, come to Lebanon. And when you come, Christopher, as you mentioned, when you come, you see what it is. You can't make it up. You see Christians and Muslims living in fairly good harmony. You see also a political um, stalemate that has been almost bankrupting the country. And then you see the people up in the villages living their lives as if nothing is wrong with them. It's very, very beautiful. Um, I remember when I went in 1983, they were bombing one side of the street, and on the other side they were rebuilding. And that's Lebanon. That's the beauty of Lebanon. Unfortunately, we've been used to so much difficulties, mostly from outside. Um, and then the different factions within Lebanon, which are always going to be there, will take sides. Those who prefer the Iranian, those who prefer the Saudis, those who have affinity towards Israel, those who are against Israel, those who are for the regime in Syria, those who are against the regime in Syria. There's a lot of our neighbors are not too easy to live with, but the Lebanese people have found a way, and there's still a deep faith, even at the shrines. The shrines of Our Lady of Lebanon, St. Charbel, even the Kadisha Valley, as you mentioned, you'll see women in hijab, which means Shiite or sometimes Sunni families will come, and they receive hospitality. You look at the schools, the hospitals, the nursing homes, the drug rehabilitation centers, the charitable organizations. They serve Christians and Muslims, mostly run by Christians, but they serve everyone.
So Lebanon is a very special place, and we are right to focus on it and hold it up to the world as an example.
Yes, and if I may say, Robert and Christopher, you're in good company because the popes felt the same way.
Hmm.
As you know, there was a synod for Africa, a synod for North and South America, a synod for Europe, a synod for Oceania, and a synod for Lebanon.
All right.
Yeah, so
And it was which pope was it with Benedict who wrote the encyclical on Lebanon, or
it was actually Pope John Paul the second who wrote New Hope for Lebanon.
okay.
That was after the synod for Lebanon,
Oh. And
and I
so,
think Benedict came, and I think he visited and he gave Lebanon another nudge forward. So the popes get it. So the two of you are on the right track.
well, and the point is, somehow it's for everyone's advantage that Lebanon succeed, and yet there are many different factions that seemingly want to tear it apart. So there's a tremendous struggle. I would call it David and Goliath. There's the Maronite, the courageous and good and Maronite people, and also in the Islamic community, good people. And they want Lebanon to be a peaceful country. And then there's people in other countries that want to take the southern part, take it away from Lebanon, take the eastern parts, connect it back to Syria. There's people that want the country to be a plaything in between the powers of Saudi Arabia, which is Sunni Islam, Iran, which is Shiite Islam, Israel, which is Jewish and is facing the question of the Palestinians, largely Islamic, who have now moved up into southern Lebanon and comprise Hezbollah. And all these foreign influences are stretching and bending the connections inside Lebanon. And we'd like to see and pray and hope that the connections could be maintained. What do you think, Bishop?
Yeah. So if I can go to the beginning of modern Lebanon, the state of Lebanon, and that's the whole challenge. America was formed with its first principle, religious freedom. So America did not want a government to tell a man what his conscience should think. Rather, that a man is free and his conscience is sacred. And so the government is for the people and by the people. America is very, very clear with that resounding First Amendment of religious freedom. That defines America. 100 years ago, what defined modern-day Lebanon was you had a 76-year-old Maronite patriarch who went to Versailles to urge the Allies, who were then carving up the Middle East, to allow Lebanon to be a Muslim-Christian conviviality.
Yeah. You're
And
referring to Versailles right after the First World War, after
right,
the Ottoman Empire had collapsed.
1919, that's right.
Okay.
Now, my point, I'll make it very briefly, he went with the um, Sunni leader. Now, it was the Sunnis in the person of the Ottomans that decimated Lebanon, just like it decimated every Christian community. But he had hope for Lebanon with his Muslim counterparts. And so some Christians were saying, no, urge to have a Mount Lebanon just for the Christians. And he would say, no. In fact, he broadly outlined a Lebanon that includes Shiites, Sunnis, Druze, and Christian on purpose. Now that's right after being decimated by Muslims in the person of the Turks. So if that's not an act of faith or an act of courage, and that's what we don't want to lose in Lebanon. We don't want Christians to dominate. We don't want Muslims to dominate. We like it to continue to be a Christian-Muslim conviviality.
Okay. Well, that's very beautiful. But are there signs that we're in danger right now?
There are, um, there are dangers, and I think they come from the Christians who probably don't know how to compromise a little bit, and from the Sunni and Muslim communities. The Sunnis have the Syrian refugees and the Palestinian refugees. Now, Palestinians are more than 500,000, Syrians 1,500,000.
Hmm.
They could reshape the country if they wanted to, into a Sunni country. And then you have the Shiites in the south who have an anger towards Israel and try to dominate the Lebanese political landscape, especially in the person of their leader. And they're not very compromising in their veto power over what goes on in Lebanon. And that's the reason for the port explosion 3 years ago. Nobody can investigate that because mostly Hezbollah controls the port and the airport. So I'm not saying they created that problem, but we don't know the cause of that explosion. But and many assassinations that have taken place. And there's always a group that blocks investigating those tragedies. So the Christians have two options. One, they can side with the Sunnis, or they can side with the Shiites. And I always encourage the Christians not to marry either side, but to live in a healthy communion with them. One that can allow Christians to live with both sides and also steer the country towards the middle. So that's my hope.
Well, what I was thinking of doing then is divide the rest of our time, which is about 40 minutes, into 3 sections of about 12 or 13 minutes, where we would go over the history, we could look at the present, and then we'd take questions. And I wanted people to get a clear idea of the shape of Lebanon, and I thought you and Christopher could go through these maps and talk to our audience about how Lebanon is formed, and then talk about the present hopes to do the very best that we can to hold Lebanon together. So here we have a couple of maps. Christopher, what are we seeing?
We're seeing a country that is about the size of Connecticut or smaller, I think. It's right there north of Israel, right in the Middle East. It's almost completely surrounded by Syria, and in the south there's Israel, and all other sides there's Syria, and then there's the Mediterranean. And I would like to ask the bishop first off, why is this so crucial, not just for Lebanon? Why is the situation not just for Lebanon itself, and we should care about it because of just having it be a country that should be going in the right direction, but why should we care about it in the context of the Middle East and the world as a whole? Why does it have this outsized role, this role that's far more important than its actual size and population?
I think to answer that, Christopher, you look at the country of Lebanon. It's surrounded by Syria to the east and to the north, and by Israel in the south. It's a crossroads. It's a crossroads of culture. You have 6 different Catholic communities there. You have 4 or 5 different Orthodox communities there, Orthodox Christian. And then you have Sunni, Shiite, and Druze. And as you might know, both of you know from history, there were only 3 places where Christians, Jews, and Muslims lived in a conviviality. The first was Andalusian Spain, and that was gone. And then there was Isfahan, Iran, and that was gone. This is the only place where the Christians and Muslims are on equal footing. In the rest of the Islamic world, it's Islamic-dominated governments, and the Christians are minorities, and they have to beg to even rebuild a church or even do an outside procession. And so Islam does not have a good track record with dealing with the other, which is unfortunate. But in Lebanon, there is this respect for the other. You look at many of the conflicts in Africa these days. Africa, those conflicts are between Muslim groups, armed bandits, Boko Haram, etc., and the populace. And many of the governments don't know how to deal with reining in these armed troops. So in Lebanon, you have a strong Islamic population, educated very well in communion with Christians, whether it's at University of Beirut or Lebanese University or one of the 6 Catholic universities, and many of the schools. Some of the schools are 90% Muslim, 10% Christian, Catholic schools. So this conviviality is very, very important. Or we just cave into the idea that Islam and Christianity can't live together. Islam and Judaism is already, they're at each other's necks in Palestine and Israel.
Yeah.
So that's my hope, and I think that's most people's hope for Lebanon, that we show a different side of Islamic-Christian dialogue.
Can you tell us something about this map, or Christopher? What are the blue?
I wanted to ask about this map as well, because these divisions, and they're religious divisions, but there's also an ethnic component to them, which if you go into the story of Noah and his children, I don't quite remember which children are supposed to become the Phoenicians and which are supposed to become the Israelites and the Aramaeans. But this is a map of the ancient Near East, and we see the kingdom of Judah, kingdom of Israel, kingdom of Aram, Damascus, and the Phoenician states. And so, what is the identity of, you said Muslim and Christian, but what kind of other things are going on here with Lebanon and the Phoenician heritage, or is that just a myth?
No,
And
no, it's not a myth, Christopher. And it's important to the identity of the Lebanese. So the Phoenicians, quote unquote, conquered the Mediterranean basin without having armies, without having to kill anybody. How did they conquer it? They navigated by the stars and the currents of the sea, and they established themselves at all the different ports of the Mediterranean. So the Phoenicians, excuse me, were everywhere, all over the Mediterranean basin. And if you want to know the best of the Lebanese people, Christian and Muslims alike, they're in the business field, they're very well educated. Other than the people of the Middle East, the Jewish people and the I would say the Jewish, the Lebanese, and the Armenians, they're all very good dealing with people, very good in business, in finance, in education, in medicine. So that comes natural to Lebanon without any boasting. So, but I don't know about the other parts of that map, but but the Phoenicians were able to navigate very, very well with other people. And I think, if given half a chance, Lebanon can get through this present crisis and go back to being um, able to navigate any difficult waters.
yeah, and if I could just add to that, the Phoenician identity of Lebanon, it's interesting because when you think and when you read about this ancient history, these were very well known and well and cities with a reputation for having great wealth, great amounts of trade. So Byblos, where the word for the Bible comes from, because there was so much papyrus and paper being produced there. Tyre, Sidon, where Jesus went, because those were large cities filled with people that he wanted to interact with and preach to, and of course Beirut. And it does have that very cosmopolitan um, feeling when you're in those cities, and it's very different from some of the other places that you might go in the region. It's a sense of like this was the point of gravity for the, even going back 2 or 3 thousand years. Like this was a very important place to a lot of people, even even before Christianity existed, and before, certainly before Islam existed. So
Mhm.
Well,
yeah.
I wanted to just say, Mechtild Boles writes to us, thank you for the history lesson. And we have the Don watching. Salve, Your Excellency, Robert and Christopher, enjoying this presentation very much.
Thank
And
you, Ladon.
and then John Sutton writes, the Holy Spirit guided me to celebrate Maronite Mass by Bishop Mansour at the Napa Institute. The beauty, history, and timeless sacredness of the Maronite Mass humbled me, blessed beyond words. So, what we're talking about here ranges from geography and the nature of ethnicity and ancient traditions of language and of communication, Biblos, creation of alphabet, navigation of the Phoenicians, the business and expertise of the Phoenicians, the early Lebanese, also of the Armenians, also of the Jewish people. And then this country emerges with the beautiful mountains and the cedars of the beaches, which are the same. It's just another 50 or 100 miles up the beach from Israel. It's the same type of country. And on that map, we were showing the Sea of Galilee in the south, the Dead Sea further south. I guess we could go back and see that too. The very top part of the blue section is around Sea of Galilee, and there's a river that goes down, the Jordan River, to that longer blue section in the lower middle of the map, which is the Dead Sea. And that's from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea is the area where Jesus walked and traveled. And then in the brown section, which is this area of Lebanon today, at the top and on the left, we see those cities that were already in that time very vibrant centers of culture. And Jesus traveled to those cities. They say that he went and preached in Tyre and in Sidon. And up there in the very top in the middle of the map, that's where the cedars of Lebanon are. And then over to the right, you come to Damascus and Syria. And these were the places where St. Paul traveled to when he left Jerusalem and was persecuting the Christians and wanted to capture them up in Damascus. And then he was struck down from his horse. So Lebanon is an integral part of the Holy Land, we could say.
Yes, and if just wanted to also say that with the languages, from what people know about Phoenician, Phoenician is certainly was a Semitic language. It's now basically not spoken anymore. It's extinct, but Phoenician was spoken in the area of now modern Lebanon and also in Carthage, which was North Africa, the main enemy of Rome, the Roman Empire for several hundred years. That was basically the same language that came originally from the area of Lebanon. And so, as the bishop said, it was spoken all around the Mediterranean. But it's a Semitic language. It's close to Aramaic, and it's also close to Hebrew. And those three languages are, well, one is now extinct, and then the other one is the traditional language of Christians, Aramaic, and the other is, of course, Hebrew, which has now been revitalized by Israel and is a modern language and also religious language. But they're all basically the same people with three languages.
Well, I wanted to say, Chris, you're interested, and the bishop, I wanted to ask you, can Aramaic survive and prosper? And could it even be more widely used? And how can we help that? Is it important that we remember the language that Jesus himself spoke?
So after the Phoenician language was dying out, a new language was the lingua franca for all of the Middle East, including Israel, modern-day Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and that was Aramaic. Aramaic morphed into Syriac, West Syriac, and East Syriac. So Syriac is a dialect of Aramaic. So to answer your question, Robert, it's not only alive, but doing very well. Syriac is still the liturgical language of the Maronite Church, of the Syriac Church, of much of the Syriac-speaking Christians of Iraq and Iran and Syria. And the Aramaic, the literal Aramaic, is just, there's a few pockets left, like in Malula and perhaps parts, another.
Where is Malula?
In Syria. It's a small little village in Syria. That's the particular dialect that perhaps Jesus spoke, but the Syriac is pretty much still alive and well.
In other words, Jesus would have understood almost perfectly Syriac. You say Aramaic was a dialect of Syriac.
No, Syriac is a dialect of Aramaic.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So.
Okay, but so what I'm really getting at here for our viewers is that in these countries and in these people, we have a direct descendants from the time of Jesus, even including the use of the language that he used, that needs to be preserved. And this is our message.
The point I would make, Robert, is that we have the culture of Jesus. You look at the line dances, you look at the foods, you look at the we call each other brother. You know, the warmth and hospitality of the Jewish people of Jesus' time. If you've seen The Chosen, which is, I think, a very good series on the person of Jesus. That's the Lebanese culture. And that's what, and that's the culture of the Syriac-speaking Christians too, which is still alive and very well.
So can we support that somehow?
Yes, my suggestion is to support the Catholic institutions of Lebanon, for instance, or of Syria or Iraq, or of the Holy Land. Those Catholic institutions, they serve everybody, whether it's a university or a school or a hospital or a care center, refugees. So any Catholic community that is serving, I would really like us to support them. And you're doing that with this the Friends for Lebanon, and I appreciate that.
Bishop Mansour, I hesitate to do this. I didn't tell you I would ask you, but I would love it if you could pray or recite with a little almost teaching us the Lord's Prayer in, if you can, I don't know, in Aramaic and in English, and explain to us when Jesus said pray like this, he would have spoken those words. Can you go through it for us?
Go through a couple lines of the Our Father. Abud Beshmayo, Netekadashmok, Tite Melkutoch, Nahwe Sabyonoch. So Abun Beshmayo. Abun is our Father. Beshmayo, our Father who art in heaven. Netekadashmok. Holy, hallowed be your name. Tite Melkutoch. Tite, may you come. Melkutoch, your kingdom, may it come with us. Tite Melkutoch. Nahwe Sabyonoch. Nahwe, may your will, Sabyonoch, is your will be done. Aikano Beshmayo Afbaro, on earth as it is in heaven.
Beautiful,
So
beautiful.
it is beautiful. It's
So,
beautiful to be able to hear it and to be able to pray it.
so those are the same words that Jesus used.
Yeah. Yes. Now the Chaldeans, they end their words with instead of o, as this. So the Chaldeans and the Assyrians have the East Syriac dialect. The Maronites and the Syriacs have the West Syriac dialect.
I see. So it's just a dialect. Well, okay, so why is there any doubt that we should give absolute continual support to a peaceful, unified Lebanon so that these people can grow up? But what we are doing is half-hearted and even unorganized. And so when we went to Lebanon, we found many young people say, I just want to leave Lebanon. I'd like to visit and stay in the United States or go to France or even Italy, anywhere but here where the banks are closed, the jobs are few, the pressures are many, there's a lot of problems. And at the same time, there was a sense of the beauty and the food and the color, the sun. How can we help do something beautiful for Lebanon?
I think, as I mentioned before, the schools, we can advocate, of course, in our government, but I'm proud of the American government because they've been really supporting the Army, which is the strong national institution of the Army of Lebanon. And they've been trying to get the Lebanese to be able to come to a compromise candidate for presidency. I'll say something else about the American government. I'm really proud of the government working separately with Israel and separately with Lebanon, because there's no peace treaty between the two countries, to delineate the maritime border. And that was a success story of the American government dealing with both sides to have the Lebanese now being able to drill and explore for natural gas in the Mediterranean Sea. I hope and pray that America would do the same effort for the land border so that between Israel and Lebanon, there's no more disputes. Who needs to be in an endless dispute for what? But I think Hezbollah needs it to claim their existence, and Israel may need it to claim their need to be tough on the Arab states. But you know what? It's tiresome. Life is short. I remember someone criticized Patriarch Rai, and I was so proud of Patriarch Rai. He went to Israel. They criticized him because there's no peace treaty between Israel and Lebanon. He said, I'm a pastor. I have 11 parishes in Israel. They're not foster children, they're my children. Just because you hate another country doesn't mean I have to hate them. And I think that's my beef with Hezbollah. They want me to hate who they hate, and I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm too old to pretend.
Okay, let's look at Hezbollah.
I wanted to add to what the bishop said also about Friends of Lebanon, and yeah, we can obviously talk about all of those issues at great length, but with Friends of Lebanon, yes, we're doing the short-term help. We've supported food boxes. We've supported water purifiers. We've basically been helping the people that are on the ground. We've only been to Lebanon in person twice in the case of Dad, and once in my case, but we have gotten these great contacts with so many people. We've been supporting them financially, having people go back and forth, bring these things into Lebanon. And we also have long-term hope that we want to support. So long-term hope is all of these political questions, and we're not saying that we are able to resolve the political questions, because they're obviously go back far beyond any of our lives and probably will continue into the future. But we do believe that the country is a message of peace, and we do believe that if we seek this type of long-term hope, that we can do it through things like educating people about this tradition, this language, this heritage, the music, writing the reports, taking people there, showing them just what it is in the flesh. And it will be basically, to me, it'll be very difficult to solve any of these problems, political and all of these conflicts, unless we show people what it is in the flesh. So to me, that is what our mission, long-term hope, is: showing them this land and this tradition and heritage in the flesh. So,
Chris, what is this that's on the screen now?
this is what I'm talking about. Yeah, the Aramaic language and how Lebanon has preserved this until the present day, really in an unbroken chain back to 2,000 years ago, and through many challenges, through the Arab invasion of the 600 to about 1000, and the wars between Arabs and Byzantine and the Ottoman occupation and all of this. The Maronites continued in Lebanon. The Syriac Christians and Orthodox Christians also continued. But yeah, the Maronites were just in the mountains fighting for their identity and have continued to do that. It's actually an amazing story. It really is an impressive track record and historical record when you really learn about it. It's an incredible story.
We have this Biserka Brito, thank you, most enlightening, but I appreciate that, Biserka. And then we see you have this Lebanon report, which you are writing, Christopher, and I just wanted you to say that this is coming out.
Yeah, I'm writing this every month, and it's available on our website, urbitorbicommunications.com. And you can go back for the last 2 years, see what I've written. I've been writing about politics in Lebanon, tracking some of the political issues, but also trying to go more in depth on the culture and the history
You've been talking also about
Saint Charbel, yeah. So the next Lebanon report, which will be hopefully coming out tomorrow, is going to have a discussion with a man who has a very close relationship to Saint Charbel, and he is now directing the Friends of Saint Charbel organization, and I'm sure the bishop knows him as well. His name is Raymond Nader, or Nader, or however you pronounce it.
Bishop,
And
do you know Raymond?
Of course, I know very well.
Okay.
yeah,
Christopher and I had lunch with him a couple of days ago. We're deeply impressed. Can you tell us anything about him?
Yeah, he's a layman who's really been touched literally by Charbel. He's got the marks to show it on his arm. And he's been promoting Charbel throughout the world. And I don't know that anybody really needs to promote Charbel because he goes wherever he wants. To Muslims, Christians, Jews, Charbel is, he almost doesn't need a broker. So,
But people don't know so much about him. Let's give a quick explanation of who is Saint Charbel. And just one moment, Antonia. Hello, could you please explain who the Maronites are and what the Maronite is compared to Catholicism? I think if you're a bishop in the Maronite Church, you can help us with this question. And then Saint Charbel.
okay, so when the early church grew up, it grew up in three languages: Latin, Greek, and Syriac. Most people think that it's just Greek and Latin. Latin church brought forth the Roman Catholic Church, the Greek church, the Byzantine churches, the Syriac church, the Maronite church, the Chaldean church, the Coptic church, the Armenian church that grew up from that language. By the time of the 4th century, we have Saint Maron. Saint Maron was a hermit and a priest, an inspiring personality. By the time of his death, there were 800 monks around him. They became known as Beit Maroon, Beit B-E-I-T, the House of Maron.
I see. So he would be the equivalent of Saint Anthony in the desert, or even of some Saint Augustine on the western side. Saint Maroon gave his name to the Maronites, and he was kind of a Saint Athanasius or Saint Anthony monk on the eastern side, speaking Syriac.
Yes, I would say more like Saint Benedict. So the Benedictine monks evangelized Europe. The Maronite monks evangelized most of the Middle East, and then became so active that they became their own church, their own their own monasteries. Then gave learning, gave preachers, gave evangelizers to the countryside, and so Lebanon became the fortress for the Maronites. Why? Because they lived in the plains of Syria where ISIS was a few years ago and destroyed most things. But in that area, there was already a lot of destruction from Muslim leaders who did not want the Christian presence. So we fled from there, made our home in the holy valley of Lebanon that Christopher is speaking about, the Kadisha, Wadi Kadisha. And it's from there that we went through parts of Lebanon and evangelized the countryside and established ourselves as the Maronite Church.
Can I just ask, when the Maronites pray and they have what we call the Mass, how can they have such a similar Mass as the Catholics do and the Byzantines do? What is the source of this prayer that venerates and worships God? Why is it so similar everywhere? Oh, yeah. Antonia says, very interesting. And you answered my question. And Jean Zanetti says, interesting. I did not know this. So thank you, Bishop. We are really, I think, helping some people.
You're welcome. I hope so. So the beauty of a church before internet, before telephone, before fax machines was that we were doing a most amazing thing already. We took the Jewish synagogue liturgy of the word, and each tradition, Greek, Latin, and Syriac, built upon that the Eucharistic prayer. The Latin has their own Eucharistic prayer, the Byzantine, the anaphora of St. John Chrysostom. The Maronites had 72 different anaphora, different Eucharistic prayers. We use about 8 now. And the Church of the East Syriac, uses the anaphora of Adai and Mari. So we took the basic liturgy of the word, and expounded upon it for a Eucharistic prayer, because word and sacrament go together, word and Eucharist go together, and that became our Mass. Now, what's beautiful about the Catholic Church is that we have 23 of those different churches that grew up and are all under the Pope, and the one Latin church under the Pope. So it's a communion of churches, 23 East and one West, that make up the communion of the Catholic Church.
Well, oh, what you've just told us is something very true and yet so little known.
Yes.
The Roman Catholic Church is uniting under the Pope of Rome, one Latin church and 23 or 22 Eastern churches.
23. It depends how you count it, but 23.
Okay. And there is a difference in the liturgy, using the language and using the various prayers, but there is a commonality in reverence to the successor of Peter. And what you also mentioned is that each of these have a Eucharist, which means the center of the Mass is only what happened to Jesus on the last days of his life. And then it represents his Last Supper, his crucifixion, his sacrifice of himself, and it represents his resurrection.
Exactly.
And this is all the Mass essentially is.
Right. That's right. Got it.
And that
So-
by replacing this every Sunday at the center of our lives, we make those times in 33 AD the center of time and space, and we recenter it and give it meaning through recollecting and representing and reenacting that moment. And this is what the Christian faith is.
Yes. And Robert, not just to something from the past, but to say, like when I lift up the host, I'm lifting up the living Christ who was crucified and raised from the dead. And I therefore make a sacrificial offering of my own life in communion with his, so that all my sufferings and difficulties are meaningful for me in the midst of the kingdom.
But do you have sufferings and difficulties?
Just a few.
Is there anything that we could help with in terms of Lebanon? What would be the one request you would make of all of us?
Just keep doing what you're doing, especially inside the Vatican, what you're doing, connecting with Catholic institutions there. It makes a big difference. They're running on empty. The government is giving them nothing. They're serving the poor. The biggest mental health facility in the Middle East is run by a group of sisters, Franciscans, and they need everything they can to just care for them.
Do you have a name of that? And is it in
Yeah.
there?
The Franciscan Sisters of the Holy Cross.
All right, Christopher, take a note. We could take questions now. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we have people saying much better to become a hermit nowadays. Peter wrote that, and then Antonia said, yes, indeed, better to be a hermit. I think they're referring to Saint Charbel. Let's go back to Saint Charbel, who was a hermit. And how did a man who lived all alone become someone that the whole world would turn to? What is his secret?
You know, his secret is only lies in God. You know, there's no other way. Why would God put a seal of approval on that kind of a life? Because he wanted to bring some attention. And maybe he wanted his country, Lebanon, and the world to see that in the interior life is very important. Not just how we do things, but how we are inside of ourselves. That was Charbel's desire, to make himself a proper temple for God.
Is this an actual photograph?
This is a take on a photograph that was done by a Catholic priest who went to Lebanon, took a photograph of 3 of his seminarian friends, and a 4th face appeared. And they found out later that it was the face of Charbel, because some of the monks recognized it.
So Charbel lived from 1828 to 1898. There was photography from the 1860s on, not too good, but then he became known as a holy man who could intercede for people who prayed for his intercession. And there, we visited where he is buried, and there's a record room with records kept of people writing, say, I was blind, or my father was blind, or my child, or lame, and we prayed, and they were healed. We have more than 29,000 records of people who said something miraculous happened. How can so many miraculous things happen in our very scientific world?
That's what the church calls them, wonder workers. Padre Pio, Saint Teresa of the Little Flower. They never left their places, but they're all over the world. They are intercessors for the needy, and the church has a particular name for them, wonder workers. And to be honest, how else can we explain Lebanon? It should have fallen like Venezuela, but
Well,
it's still up and running, and it runs by miracles.
Christopher, I think you have some connection with Saint Charbel.
Yes, his feast day is on my birthday.
Okay, good.
So
Yeah.
what does he seem to mean to you?
I'm very impressed and impressed by his life, and I've read a lot of things that people have written about him, and I've visited the place, and being at the place and seeing the kind of log that he slept on the last years of his life in the Hermitage was so interesting to see. It's so difficult to imagine the type of life that he had and the sacrifices that he made just on a daily basis, just in his pursuit of holiness and solitude and all of the things that he wanted to be closer to God and to the true level of reality that he was seeking.
Christopher, I'm so impressed with you. You really have gone deep in and in Charbel and the Maronite. I'm happy. I'm happy to share this telecast. Happy with what you're
Thank you. Yeah.
doing. If I might say a word about Charbel. You know, he was canonized in 1977, but he was beatified by Paul VI at the end of the Vatican Council. That time, Paul VI said, if we want to know what true renewal looks like in the world, look to Charbel.
Okay, so really he would be someone to look to even at something like this upcoming synod.
Yes.
Instead of debates over sexuality,
Yes.
Charbel is seeking to draw closer to the mysterious, attractive, awesome, holy God.
Holy and true, good and beautiful God. Yes.
And he basically, you look at his face and you can see a man who was in search of that.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, we have another comment here. Patty Afif, sorry. Hi, Bishop Gregory. I'm so grateful my son Jean-Paul Afif was able to meet you at the Napa conference this weekend. God bless you for your voice and perspective of our Maronite faith. So you have a fan, I guess. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, I met John Paul. He impressed me a lot. He's a tall man, very interested in going deeper in his faith. So I'm glad to meet now his mother.
Wonderful. Well, let's try to conclude. I appreciate you, Bishop, coming on with us, taking your time. And we are trying to raise funds. We are appreciative of small gifts. Some people give us $10, $25. We send these funds for small scale projects, some tuition assistance to people who otherwise maybe have to stop going to school. The economy in Lebanon has been in a crisis. Then with Christopher's report, the Lebanon report, we're trying to urge the diaspora Lebanese community to go even further. We know it's done enormous things. They're very supportive. But nevertheless, the country is still in danger and people are still attracted to leaving. So we would encourage them to perhaps have a meeting or develop a kind of central database to try to help even more. What do you think, Bishop?
I agree. The diaspora is really doing a lion's share right now I know that my parishes and my parishioners are doing beautiful work for Lebanon, but I encourage them to redouble their efforts. It's worth it. Lebanon survives on miracles, and it's the miracle of the diaspora community that helps them the most.
Okay.
Well, I every time that I've talked to you, Bishop, I feel a sense of optimism. I don't always get that sense from other people, and they're very justified in not feeling optimistic, but I really appreciate your optimism and positive outlook on all of everything that's happening, and in the face of some facts that aren't so
Yeah.
easy to deal with. I think that it's a great way of putting it. It runs on miracles, and I appreciate that, and I agree with that.
Thank you. My optimism goes back to Patriarch Hawaii, who traveled at 76 years old to create a Lebanon that would be a meaningful Lebanon, Christian and Muslim conviviality. He had that hope right after being decimated by the Ottoman Turks. So I try to share that.
We do have one more question about the corrupt or incorrupt body of Saint Charbel. I think we've lost you for a minute, Bishop, but you usually return.
Yeah, there we go.
And Delia Mitri asks, is the body of Saint Charbel incorrupt? And if yes, why don't you show him? I think there's so many miracles about his body. Can you give us a summary, and then we'll conclude this show, and we'll come back again.
Yes, you probably have to ask someone on the ground there. But from my knowledge, after 1965, after he was beatified, or either after 1977 when he was canonized, his body began to show some deterioration. And that's all that I know.
So there was a period for 70 years after his death
Right.
when his body was exuding a kind of water or oil
Yeah.
that was collected. No one could explain it. Also, a light came from the cracks in his tomb, and it was kind of shining out. And they occasionally would open up to see, where is this light coming from? And they could never figure it out.
Yep.
They could even see it from outside the building.
Uh-huh.
It was as if a kind of fluorescent light was shining from his tomb. So, but then this has changed in recent years.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening recently there. I was there about 2-3 years ago. So
there's still many miracles that are, and kind of healings, and people that are experiencing a lot of
you
miraculous things when they go there.
9,000. Those are the ones recorded. There's probably double or triple that many not recorded.
Why don't we end with the story, Christopher, that you reported on that woman from Australia?
Well, there was a woman that I think had terminal cancer diagnosis. She was, I think, Lebanese, but living in Australia, and she returned to Lebanon. I don't remember exactly the year.
2016 or 17.
Yeah, around that time, she came back to Lebanon, and she decided to make a pilgrimage to Anaya, which is the burial place or the tomb of Saint Charbel. He's in a chapel there at the monastery, and she walked in, prayed before the tomb, came out, and there was a priest there who she started talking to, and talked with him for a short time, 10 minutes, and she told him about her life, and he said that he would pray for her. And somebody took a photo of the conversation of the two of them talking. You can't quite see his face, but she got back in the car and she went to her next doctor's appointment, and they said, your cancer has disappeared. And they look at the photo, and somebody made a comment that this is obviously a figure of Saint Charbel. And when you look at the photo, it really does look like him, and nobody can identify this person. It's not somebody it's not like a person that is living there, a priest who lives there, that they say, oh, that's him. It's somebody that never has appeared and been taken a photo of in that same place and time. So it's obviously something unusual that occurred in this case, and this an unusual healing and an unusual apparition. So I wrote about it.
Thank you, Christopher. And so, Bishop, let's end this program by saying, what are these supernatural sort of drops from heaven that come down into our lives mysteriously, where we say, what was that? This is a photo. This woman was told she had cancer, terminal, and she was told then, you're clear. And she had met this man, and it looks like St. Charbel. What's your reaction to this?
I hate to say it, but that's nothing new. This is Charbel. This is Charbel. He's worthy of our trust. He's worthy of our devotion. And that's why God called him to the altar, to tell us that if we want to know how to please God, it's to have a love for the Virgin, which he did, a love for the Holy Eucharist. He died. He had a stroke celebrating Mass. And it's to have an interior life that is worthy of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And that's the interior life that Charbel calls us to.
Well, thank you, Bishop Gregory Mansour. Thank you, Christopher Hart Moynihan. This has been a wonderful program. We're lucky to have you back on again soon, Bishop Gregory.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Yes.
Join us this September on an unforgettable pilgrimage to Lebanon, the land where Christ walked. This is a pilgrimage you won't want to miss. We'll taste world-renowned Lebanese cuisine, drift through underground grottos, and explore the monasteries high above in the mountains and in the deepest valleys on our way to an encounter with the miracle worker, Saint Charbel, in the land where Christ walked. Join us this fall, September 16th through the 25th, 2023.